that in mind, I mean, can you talk about some of the best practices or perhaps lessons learned that you guys have experienced?
Yeah, kind of go back a little bit in your presentation. If you haven't heard of Velostrata, go check it out. It's the real deal. We were one of their first customers. Makes a tremendous difference if you're doing any kind of lift and shift or lift and lightly optimized migrations. There's a lot of that we're doing. And it really works as advertised. It sounded a lot like magic to me when they first pitched it, and they've proven to be a great partner, and it works.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about various journeys that you would take for applications to get to the cloud. We've talked a little bit about a hybrid architecture that you might want to think about when you're coming in the cloud. But you still have to figure out how you can move those actual workloads and that data as quickly as possible. So if you're going down this path, what are some of the biggest challenges you're going to run into? A recent survey showed that most migration projects, unfortunately, aren't super successful. About 94% of them run into delays. They're over budget. We've often heard even of cases where people have moved workloads to the cloud only to move them back because of something they didn't realize, something they didn't plan for properly. Why is this hard? Well, a lot of organizations have not just hundreds, but maybe thousands of workloads and applications that they need to move. So how do you handle the scale? How do you figure out which applications to move, what the dependencies are? It's pretty daunting. Not to mention the fact that organizationally, you'll have different owners of these applications, and you may need to get their approval in the migration process. Another area of complexity is they come from different sources. Many of them could be running in virtual machines on VMware. They could be running on physical. Some of them could be in another cloud, and you want to move them to GCP. Of course, we have also complexity. Your most mission-critical workloads, say it's an SAP or an Oracle database, these are applications that are business-critical. You do want to take advantage of moving them to the cloud, but the problem is you can't take any business risk, and you don't even want to take any downtime, or at least keep that downtime to an absolute minimum. So those concerns lead into this question of risk. How can you actually prepare yourself and test? And is there a way that you can make sure that it's highly likely that workloads succeed when you move them? But in the worst case, if things don't go well, you can roll back. Fortunately, we came across a partner that we've been working with for a while called Velostrata. And we recently announced an acquisition about a month ago that closed. They were already a partner helping with migrations to Google Cloud. But we found that it's a very complementary team, technology, and product. And really what they're enabling us to do is provide an enterprise-grade, purpose-built solution for helping accelerate the migrations of workloads to GCP. Not only can they move from on-premises to Google Cloud, but you can also move from AWS to GCP. So this technology and this product is a real enabler to reducing the friction involved in these complex migrations. One of the key capabilities is that it allows you to move your workloads very quickly, oftentimes with less than 10 minutes of downtime. And that's pretty amazing. Like if you think about how you want to actually reduce the impact and reduce the friction of a migration, if you can reduce that downtime, this is a critical advantage. So the typical migration, what will happen is you'll have a bunch of data, the disks associated with your VMs, and you need to copy that up to the cloud before you can actually migrate. And if it's a large VM with, say, a terabyte virtual disk, that's going to take some time. That could take hours. Now you multiply that by hundreds of workloads or thousands, and you can see how long this process can take. The key insight from the Velostrata team was to look at how you decouple compute from storage. And so the idea is that actually you can stream cloud and stream the storage. So essentially what happens is you take a short downtime period at the beginning, and you start bringing over the most critical pieces of the storage. And there's a lot of intelligence and WAN optimization in this technology that allows you to start that process. And then once you've moved those critical pieces, you can start running your workload in the cloud while the rest of the data gets migrated in the background. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words, so let's take a look at this graph. What it shows here is, this is from a customer example this is showing time on the x-axis, and y is both the number of VMs that are running, that have been moved to the cloud, as well as in green, the amount of data that's been migrated. So this customer chose to make 2-week sprints to actually do the migration, and you can see that there's a step function. In the first week, what they would do, if you just kind of blow into one of these sprints, they did some discovery and planning. So picking up, say, 75 VMs that they actually wanted to migrate. So figure out which ones they are, kind of plan internally how they would move them, actual schedule the migration. And then in the second week, do the actual migration. Now, what you can see in this blown up zoom is that most of the VMs were moved and running in the cloud in hours. Meanwhile, the data is streaming in the background, and in fact, it took about 3 days for all the data to get there. But in this time, the customer was able to actually start running these applications again and not impact their business. And when you think about the amount of time you have to do migrations, this means you can easily do a migration of a large number of workloads over a weekend. And be able to take, rather than trying to look at many, many days of moving a lot of data. All right. So, why is this important? Well, one, minimizing downtime, and then taking advantage of other capabilities in the tool set to be able to validate and increase the confidence that your workloads are successful. As I mentioned earlier, oftentimes less than 10 minutes and you're up and running. You save a lot of manpower, you accelerate the process of migration, and this actually greatly increases the likelihood that a migration project will be successful because you can stay under budget. But earlier I mentioned one of the challenges was around risk and complexity. What this technology also allows you to do is roll back. Unfortunately, there's a conflicting deep dive session right now going on about the Velostrata technology. And so hopefully you can see a video or look at some of the collateral online. But there's also the ability to roll back. Because while we're streaming the data to the cloud, there's still data for that virtual machine running on premises. And if you find for some reason that maybe you forgot to move a workload and that it depends on, or you have some other challenge, you always have the ability to move back. And that safety net, that insurance policy is very valuable when it comes to actually doing these large-scale migrations. And ultimately, now by getting these migrations to happen, you can get to ramp up your cloud usage much more quickly. So now that we've talked a little bit about some of the migration challenges and some of the solutions that are available, I wanted to bring one of our customers from Cardinal Health, John Latshaw, who's the Vice President of Cloud Services at Cardinal, and have him talk a little bit about the company and some of the work they've been doing with Google. John?
Thanks for having me.
So John, can you first tell the audience and tell us a little bit about Cardinal Health, what you guys do?
We do a lot of things, but in summary, we try to make healthcare more efficient and cost-effective. We're a Fortune 15 company with about $130 billion in revenue, about 700 sites, and a lot of applications. Not to be too specific.
Yeah.
One other point, if any of you have had the misfortune to be in a hospital or need to get a prescription for some sort of illness, you've probably used our services just going to a CVS or some sort of hospital.
One of the things when I was visiting you guys recently, hearing the stories about the kind of on-demand nature of the business you're in, like someone ordering something today for a patient that has a procedure tomorrow, and critical services that you have to deliver to make sure that happens.
It's hard to plan emergencies, yeah.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about what prompted Cardinal's migration to the cloud?
Yeah, it's in a nutshell, it's speed and efficiency. So our business is hard to predict. You wouldn't think that from if you look at healthcare, but it's actually a large component of our business is pharmaceutical distribution. So where drugs need to be, where generics might launch, and so a lot of that requires us to turn on a dime, and with traditional infrastructure, it's just hard to do. Whereas conversely with GCP, I can spin up, spin down, all at a moment's notice. And then although we have $130 billion in revenue, we actually run on grocery store margins, so every penny counts. So we found that running in the cloud, if you do it the right way, can be considerably more cost effective than doing it ourselves.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I mean, can you talk about some of the best practices or perhaps lessons learned that you guys have experienced?
Yeah, kind of go back a little bit in your presentation. If you haven't heard of Velostrata, go check it out. It's the real deal. We were one of their first customers. Makes a tremendous difference if you're doing any kind of lift and shift or lift and lightly optimized migrations. There's a lot of that we're doing. And it really works as advertised. It sounded a lot like magic to me when they first pitched it, and they've proven to be a great partner, and it works. So on that, you know, we're about a third of the way through, and we've learned a lot of things. I'd say there's one thing that I would say, the technology is not the hardest part of this. So while it is challenging in some aspects, don't worry about that so much. What I would say is get your house in order while you're contemplating moving. Move some non-prod workloads, but before you move production, make sure that your CMDB is accurate and up to date. We had a very complete CMDB. We could go through and say all the fields were filled out. But when we wanted to gain intelligence about our systems, like what systems were part of a business process, what applications needed to talk to what applications on what ports, it wasn't reliable because we never had to use it like that. So spend some time getting that stuff in order and be sure you can answer the right questions about what needs to talk to what. I would say be friends with your finance people. This change is going to have a ripple effect of substantial changes through the finance team. They need to be prepared for, you know, direct chargebacks. You don't have to do direct chargebacks. We chose to. It drives the right behavior, but it is a massive adjustment for them. Lastly, partner up. Maybe buy your CISO a bottle of their favorite beverage repeatedly. Security folks, by their nature, are extremely cautious. Google has an enormous emphasis on security, but it's not only their responsibility, it's a joint responsibility. And we've spent a lot of time on bringing the security folks along, getting our CISO on board, getting an endorsement. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. If I had it to do over again, I would spend more time up front on those things and less time worrying about the technology.
All right, great. So can you also talk a little bit about your experience with Google Cloud specifically? You know, what has kind of stood out with that partnership?
A couple things there. One, they've been a great partner. So their product teams have been very curious. We've gotten access to that. So for those that are kind of just dipping the toe in the water, if you've had experience with on-premise companies like, I don't know, a database company that begins with an O, or something like that, and you say, hey, it'd be great to have this feature in your next release. Maybe in a year, 2 years, it might come out. We've had the experience of working with our product teams to say, hey, on your API gateway, we would like this. And they're like, okay, cool. And like literally 6 weeks later, we have that feature. So they've been extremely responsive, extremely curious on what it takes for us to move to the cloud. And it's not an unselfish investment. I mean, we're a lot like every other Fortune 500. We have the widest variety of systems you can imagine, and if Google invests in making us successful, then that just paves the way for everyone else. I found their infrastructure, their network, to be fast and reliable, more so than other cloud providers we've looked at. Live migration's a big feature for us. We did some things internally that I call kind of unnatural acts, but it was to save on licensing fees for like some WebSphere products where we would create a VM that had 2 CPUs but 48 gig of RAM. And we did that because, you know, we wanted to save on licensing. So in some cases, we're going to unwind that and we're going to do it the right way in the cloud. Some cases we can't. And so that their custom machine size gives us that flexibility to do that instead of the kind of the t-shirt sizing that other cloud providers have.
Great. Well, thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's great to have the opportunity of fantastic customers like John and his team, and look forward to collaborating further on their continued journey into the cloud. So before I wrap up here, I want to just highlight a number of sessions. There's actually probably many other ones that are related to the topics that we've talked about, where you can get a little bit deeper. There are some customers who can talk about their experiences moving to GCP. Or if you want to look at other different technologies and products that have done migrations to cloud, here's a few sessions. And as I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, that 112 session is going on right now. So I just want to leave you all with a few important takeaways. I think what I would try to do is paint the journeys that you might want to take. And it's really important to recognize that this modernization of IT is important. There's a great opportunity here to improve efficiencies and help your business help you accelerate your business, rather than having IT infrastructure just be a lot about cost. But ultimately, Google's here to meet you where you are. We have a vision for where we want it to take everyone, but along the way, everyone might have a slightly different journey. Second, hybrid is just the reality. It is going to require rethinking a little bit about your architecture, from a network to a management to an application standpoint. But it's important to have a vision for where you want to go, because this is a reality that's here for many, many years ahead. And then finally, the journey is long, it's complex, but we're here to support you, whether it's through PSO, through the many partners we have here at the conference, from the engineering teams, from the customer teams. We're here to help you be successful. There's a lot of resources and tools and guides. And so please reach out if you need help with your migration. And thank you.